Hello, welcome to Manibil. This time I'm going to start a series of deconstructions of Bernardo Kastrup's article called The Universe in Consciousness. A sort of cryptic title maybe, right? Okay, I've been doing some David Hume, a treatise of human nature deconstructions, where I've done book one out of 3 books of the treatise, and I'm sort of stuck in a limbo of the daunting task of keeping that going, and it's a little like I don't really feel like it at the moment, to be honest, right? But I really want to get through book two in order to get going with book three, which is the most important to me, which is his ideas of morality, right? And but I put that on hold for a while because it seems to me that what I'm really concerned about at this point in time, and it's been going on for a while, is trying to make sure that I'm not overlooking something in what Bernardo Kastrup is trying to say. If anything, he's very, very persistent in his presentations of his philosophy, but I am still lacking some good ground floor of why he gets to, in particular, 2 aspects, which is how does he argue for an external world, and how does he argue for the what he calls dissociation, or the split between 2 realms of the same thing called mind, right? He says, so in a short version, he says everything is mind, but there's some part of mind that is dissociated from other parts of mind. And how does he get to that, right? If either of these fails, his philosophy is bullshit, right? You could say if it fails, if he can't establish it, he doesn't fail. He doesn't even get there, right? So I've been following for a while. Like I was sort of sitting down yesterday, sort of trying to figure out when I first heard about Bernardo Kastrup, and I think it was in 2019. It was something around summer 2019 or springs 2019. So it's been more than 4 years, at least around 4 years, that I've been following Bernardo Kastrup. At the beginning, I was sort of dumbfounded that there was actually somebody out there discussing idealist philosophies, and in a very sort of, let's say, approachable way that he does it, right? At least to some extent approachable. Now, as I've been following him, I have become more and more critical of his thinking, right? Or let's say the lack of thinking, or the lack of rigidity around the cornerstones of this philosophy. He can knock himself out in all sorts of scientific relations, and he is very knowledgeable, for lack of a better term, of various aspects of quantum physics and the history of science, and all sorts of philosophers, and he knows a lot of shit, right? Way more than I do about various scientific areas and history of philosophy, maybe also, right? But that shouldn't stop you from philosophizing, because philosophizing is individual, right? It always is individual. Nobody is an authority on your philosophy. You could say that there are certain tools you use in philosophy that if you violate those tools or the way they're supposed to be used, it's likely that people are going to say that doesn't work. In the same fashion that, let's say David Hume does when he points out the is-ought gap, right? He says, there's something about the way you argue there in your philosophy. I'm not buying it, right? I can't tell you that you shouldn't get an ought from an is. That's up to you, right? I can tell you how you should think, but as soon as you start to tell me how I should think, I'm saying, hey, hang on a minute, right? Just because you have got a philosophy doesn't mean that I have to adapt your philosophy. And this kind of thinking, which is, in my approach, the only rigid way of appealing to other people philosophizing, is to say, I'm going to respect your philosophy. That doesn't mean I'm going to adapt it, because I have my own, right? But I respect that you have your own philosophy. People claiming to be a authority on philosophy are bullshitting you. They want you to submit yourself to them or to some broader power structure, something like that, right? You are the peasant. We are the ivory tower, right? I have the PhD, so you're not a philosopher because you don't have the papers, right? Fuck off, right? Everybody should have their own philosophy, in my opinion. Now, it would be nice if we could communicate and we could interact and agree upon various aspects of what we might consider a appeal to a common ground of existence, right? Otherwise, it would be hard to figure out whether or not we should start a family and have children and so on, right? Buying a car, whatever. Something like that, right? So it might be a good idea to find some way to get to an agreement, though we might have somewhat different philosophies, right? And we might end up in a situation where we have to say, we can't agree. We have to stay apart, right? We have to not inflict each of our philosophy on somebody else, right? Therefore, I am urging you to think very carefully on when you're listening to other philosophers or philosophers in general presenting philosophy. A philosopher, in my opinion, is somebody presenting their own philosophy, right? You don't have to be a philosopher in order to philosophize. You can philosophize all you want, but at the moment you start to present your philosophy, you become or you appeal to being a philosopher, in my opinion, right? So, philosopher is not an academic, title. That's ridiculous, right? And, it's also an appeal to an infinite regression back in some obscure time, right? That this guy got a PhD from another guy who got a PhD from another guy who got a PhD from another guy. Somewhere back in, the Stone Age, somebody who wasn't a PhD said, I'm going to be a PhD now, and I can tell you who is going to be a PhD in the future. So it's an appeal to stupidity, right? It's an appeal to ridiculous, sort of infinite, chain of PhDs telling other people that whether or not they can be PhDs. Well, some way back in time, somebody who wasn't a PhD told somebody else they could be a PhD, right? So it's bullshit. And when you think about it, all the great philosophers in history, or what is usually considered great philosophers, they were not academics, right? All the great philosophers in history were not academics. At least the vast majority of them, right? And in particular, all those who got the balls rolling, right, like Socrates and so on, they were not academics. They just couldn't help it, right? And now we've got tens of thousands of academic philosophers. What are they producing? Other than smelling their own farts? Fuck off, man, right? Okay. So what we have here is an article I found from Bernardo Kastrup, and it's freely available and on the internet, and I'm going to deconstruct it in its full length, and I'm hoping that Bernardo Kastrup won't, have his friends that call themselves the government try to shoot me for trying to deconstruct his philosophical presentation, right? Because if this is so important, I would like to make sure that I understand it, right? And I can't do that without, try to deconstruct it. And you might use this, you could say, I could read it without presenting it, yes, but this is how I read out loud, right? So you might say, yeah, I don't want to read this because I'm not sure I am fully equipped in order to pinpoint various potential shortcomings in the reasonings and the presentations of the arguments and so on, but maybe Manny Beale is equipped to do that, at least to some better extent than I am, and then I'd rather listen to his deconstructions than read the shit myself, right? So that is just my approach. I'm not going to make any money off of this, right? And I'm using this in a non, well, what would they call I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to further a philosophical discussion and discourse, right? Okay, enough of that. And if I was the guy who had written this article or small pamphlet or whatever you call it, I would be more than happy that somebody else would deconstruct it, right? So that they might point out potential shortcomings in my philosophy, so I could solidify and clarify and even change or even get rid of bad philosophy in my thinking, right? Okay, so I made a little overview of the chapters here just to get a grip of what we're going to go through, right? And it starts off with a brief introduction. Okay, fair enough. And then we go into the mainstream physicalist ontology and its problems, and then consciousness as an irreducible property of matter, and then the questionable logical bridge in bottom-up panpsychism. Now, this is the same approach as, is the usual one he takes when he does these kind of things. That he starts out by saying, they have a bad philosophy over there, right? In order to, as what I would call a sophist approach to validate your own philosophy without even saying a word about it, right? So it's like, if you can create some kind of dichotomy where there are only two possibilities. There's the bad philosophy and then there's my philosophy, right? It's without even saying a word of your own philosophy. You can actually sort of lift your own philosophy to a new level, right? By pointing out those stupid idiots over there who has a bad philosophy. I don't particularly like that approach, because it's sort of pointing fingers and trying to use that as sort of a sophist lever to raise your own philosophy up without even stating one fucking word in it, right? Why don't you just start with your philosophy and tell me how you think, right? Because that's what it's about. It's your thinking. It's not those over there have a bad thinking, right? Okay, then we get into what counts as a fundamental concrete entity. And I wouldn't, fundamental concrete, we're not talking, building houses of concrete, right? So it's not concrete in that sense. Okay, the whole universe as a unitary conscious entity, fundamental concrete entity and unitary conscious entity. So it sounds like mixing the terms here. Okay, the key questions to be answered. Okay, how do you get to that? Interesting. Experiences as excitations of cosmic consciousness. Whoa. So the 5, 6, 7, and 8, there he gives his version, I would say, right? Okay, so tackling 9 is tackling the decombination problem. Okay, so his approach, idealism, comes with a problem, which is decombination, right? Okay, then in 10 is at what level does cosmic dissociation occur? Okay, so now he's coming up with dissociation in order to solve the problem of why you can't experience all mind if everything is mind, right? Okay, 11 is reducing the revealed to the concealed order. I don't know what that is, we'll see. 12, explaining the correlation between brain function and inner experience. The correlation between brain function. Brain function is, that's an interpretation of an inner experience, right? Maybe that's what he's trying to say, right? Or he'll just, at this point, I have a very strong sense that he's just a materialist who wants to say everything is mind. So he is a materialist who says, or he's not a materialist in a traditional sense, but he has the same dichotomy of inside-outside, which he has not explained fully, and that's why I'm doing this deconstruction mainly, right? And then say, yeah, there's two areas, but they're just the same now, right? So is this weird kind of mix of science and philosophy and woo-woo and religion and all coming together in this one mind thing that is sort of, what the hell have you been smoking kind of thing, right? And yeah, fine, but the problem is if he doesn't have good arguments for either saying everything is mind, or no, saying that there is an external world to your experience, and he can't point out how this external world can be of the same kind as your internal world and why they are kept apart, right? If either of these falls, it's bullshit, right? As I started out saying. So it doesn't. All the rest doesn't matter, right? It's like if you have invented a car and then you say, yeah. There's these roundish car supporting stuff. Roundish car supporting stuff. Okay, I guess you have built a car then. Then you go out and look at the car. There are no wheels. No, but I just said there are what I said before. Roundish car supporting stuff. Well, yeah, but that's just something you made up, right? There are nothing there. It's just, lying there on the ground. The box and its leather, interior. So if it isn't there, it doesn't matter if you think you built a car. There is no car, right? So it's the same kind of approach I have. If he cannot argue for either for how he gets to an external world, or how he gets to dissociate this apparently the same kind of thing into an inside and outside that is sort of kept apart. If he doesn't argue correctly for this, I don't buy it. Whatever else he comes up with, right? Okay, so that is my sort of approach. No, let me see. Oh yeah, I might point out that I am reading this from my Kindle, and it's a PDF. So usually PDFs are a little wobbly to handle in my Kindle, also because I have to keep a split screen with the stream recorder on one side and what I'm reading from on the other side, and then I have to sort of slim it a bit, and the document might start to go like this when I try to scroll and whatever. So please bear with me if I sort of get lost in the file, right? Okay, so I'll take the introduction in this one. Hopefully I'll get through the introduction, and we'll take chapter 2 in the next one. So let's hit it off. It's by Bernardo Kastrup, and it's called The Universe in Consciousness. That's very cryptical to me, right? Cryptic. And I don't like cryptic. I mean, if it's a title on a YouTube video, fine. But not in a serious philosophical article. I would like it to be more clear, right? Okay, there is an abstract here, so let's take the abstract. So never mind the title, right? Okay, so let me see if I have to do it like this to make sure that all the text is readable. Oh my God. Oh man. Yeah. Okay, abstract. I propose an idealist ontology that makes sense of reality in a more parsimonious and empirically rigorous manner than mainstream physicalism, bottom-up panpsychism, and cosmopsychism. Okay. Now, an idealist ontology that makes sense of reality. Now, then reality is there. So he's pointing to something he calls reality. What is that? Isn't it better to start with, what do I mean by reality? Now, this is an abstract, right? So it's again this academics. Why don't you just start thinking, man? Let's get to it, right? All right. So it's sort of, okay, let's get to the bottom here, right? If this is foundational metaphysics, makes sense of reality. Well, what is reality, and why do I need to make sense of it? Isn't it sensible already? Right? More parsimonious and empirical than mainstream physicalism, bottom-up panpsychism, and cosmos. Are these all the kinds of metaphysics that there are? Does it just have to make more sense than these particular three kinds of metaphysics? Physicalism, panpsychism, and cosmopsychism, right? Are there other kinds of metaphysics you're leaving out? Because then it might be sort of a sophist trick. Yes, I'm just going to point to a few that are really stupid, right? And then if people don't know there are other possibilities, they might just think that these three are bad and there's only one left, which is mine, which must be good then, or at least better, right? It feels sophist to me. And building from a foundation of, I found something that is wrong over there, I have something that is better, right? It's sort of a politician's approach to life, right? Donald Trump is stupid, therefore you have to vote for me, right? The proposed ontology also offers more explanatory power than these three alternatives, in that it does not fall prey to the hard problem of consciousness. Fall prey to? Interesting choice of words. The combination problem or the decombination problem, respectively. Okay. Explanatory power. What do you need? You're trying to make sense of reality. So now you're saying explanatory power. So making sense is trying to explain reality, or what? How could you possibly, if the ground floor is inexplicable, which I think you will have to accept that it is, otherwise it isn't a ground floor. If you have some experience of some kind, the most grounded part of that experience is inexplicable, right? How could you explain it? How can you make sense of red, right? Can you explain red? Can you explain a particular sound? How do you do that? What does it mean to explain it, right? So if you're saying, okay, reality is made up of these qualia, colors, sounds, tastes, smells, and touch, right? How do you explain them? Is that your endeavor? Are you trying to explain the colors? Explain the sounds? Explain the smells? This smells is... You can't do that. You can't explain a color, right? How do you explain red? Yeah, red is the color that particular kind of object has. Then you're bringing in an interpretation, which is the particular object, like rose, which is derived from the experiences, right? So you can't explain anything, man, right? There is no explanatory power in the basics. You just have to sort of say, okay, I have these experiences, right? What are you trying to explain? Are you trying to explain roses, for instance, or elephants? They're just cognitions from my experiences. I'm not in control whether or not I experience elephant or not, right? And I don't know why I have to experience elephant, or potentially could, or experience laptop, for instance, now, right? I can't explain why. How could I explain it? That would have to have some backdoor behind my experiences to explain why I have those experiences. Well, I need experiences to have anything, so I can't go behind my experiences, right? So there's all sorts of shit entailed in this abstract, right? I know it's an abstract, but you'll get deeper into it possibly, right? I already see a lot of problems. And he's trying to jump to extreme conclusions about things he possibly cannot say anything about, in my opinion. Okay, then he goes on. It can be summarized as follows. There is only cosmic... Okay, so, yeah, I know it's an abstract, and that an abstract used in order to, when you're roaming through thousands and thousands of potentially interesting articles, you use the abstract to get an idea what they're trying to do and the conclusion that they think they have reached. Okay. It can be summarized as well. There is only cosmic consciousness. We, as well as all other living organisms, are but dissociated alters of cosmic consciousness surrounded by its thoughts. Oh, the inanimate world we see around us. Around us. How do you see something around you? Right? If it's around you, it's not your experience. Then you can't see it. Because it has to be an experience for you to see it. So it can be around you, right? There are all sorts of impossibilities built into this, I think, right? The living organisms we share the world with. What is the world? Now he's using another term here, right? World. Cosmic. There's a cosmos. There's a world. There's a reality, right? Surrounded by thoughts. That's also apparently that reality then, right? So it's quite nonsensical in its equivocation or equation of terms. I forget the differences, but let's say equivocation used in the same terms, the same meaning with different terms, right? Or does he? I mean, who knows, man, right? I really like philosophers to make sure that they use the same terms and only one terms that reference one thing, right? And if there's another term being used where there's an overlapping from a prior term, you clarify very precisely that overlap, right? If this is there's reality, there's an outside thoughts, and there are, alters of this and that, and organisms and thoughts, and there's the shared world and the reality, and so it's like, okay, so it's all over the place, right? It sounds to me that it's like, if I read this abstract, I was trying to get to some rigid philosophy, I would say, this sounds like bullshit, right? This sounds like somebody is, circle jerking their own mind, right? Okay. 1. Brief introduction. This paper seeks to articulate an ontology that overcomes the principal limitations of the most popular alternatives. The first half of the paper comprises a detailed analysis of relevant literature highlighting what advances have been made and what problems have been created or left unsolved by recent developments in analytic philosophy. In the second half, starting from what I consider to be the most promising current platform. Okay, so you consider the most promising. That's not a fucking argument, right? It's like, yeah, because I'm a philosophical authority, so my opinions, my emotions, my feelings are very important to push things in a certain direction, right? I propose an idealist framework. So he's proposed. He has a very strong feeling that his own philosophy is great, right? Yes, of course. An idealist framework that may open viable new avenues for addressing the key questions left unanswered by this current platform. At the end, I hope to offer a coherent view of the nature of reality. So he wanted to, in the abstract, he says he wants to make sense of reality. And here he wants to give a coherent view of the nature of reality. He's giving a view of the nature of reality. He's not giving you the nature of reality. He's giving you a view of the nature of reality, right? It starts to be these layers of fluffiness, right? I offer a view of the nature of reality. I hope to offer even, right? I hope. I'm not sure about this, but I hope I can offer a view of the nature of reality. Oh, so of course, if you're presenting something, you are hoping that you sort of could, quote, for lack of a better term, convince somebody else that you might be onto something, right? Obviously, I mean, now, my point of view would be that I'm using my philosophical ramblings to say to you, yes, I have a philosophy. Yes, this is my philosophy, right? Yes, I want to encourage you to start thinking for yourself, creating your own philosophy based on your own thinking, right? And you might use my way of doing it as an inspiration for coming up with your own philosophy. That's sort of my approach, right? That's my, and you can only say, I have to, I'll have to judge whether or not I trust his descriptions of his incentives or whatever, right? And he describes his incentives here. At the end, I hope to offer a coherent view of the nature of reality that accounts. So he hoped that he can offer that. So it sounds like he's not sure what he's doing, right? I don't like this kind of fluffy bullshit, right? Because it's also sort of, he's trying to not be too strict in order to not push you away, right? Oh, I hope I'm so virtuously humble, and yes, I'm inviting you, just take a look at this, it might be, right? I don't know, right? It doesn't rub me the right way, right? At the end, I hope to offer a coherent view of the nature of reality that accounts for all relevant facts without incurring any fundamental problem. Now, an appeal to fact, right? That's a problem. Because facts have nothing to do in metaphysics, right? There are no facts in metaphysics. Metaphysics is that groundwork of thinking you need to do in order to start doing epistemology. And when you have classified what you mean by knowledge, then you can have facts, right? You can't account for relevant facts in metaphysics. That is screwed up, right? And then if he is screwing around with the terms in this way, right? Where he's trying to bring in facts in order to validate that kind of thinking he needs to be settled on in order to arrive or understand what he means by facts. Then he's a circular argument structure we are dealing with, right? And it falls to the ground. It doesn't work. It's stupid, right? Okay. Let's see what the next bit is. Yes, the next bit will be the next chapter called The Mainstream Physicalist, and sorry for all the jittering text here. I warned you, right? Okay, the number 2 is The Mainstream Physicalist Ontology and Its Problems, and I'm going to jump into that in the next one. So please share, like, and subscribe. Consider a donation, leave me a comment. What do you think? What's your approach to Bernardo Kastrup? And what do you think is shortcomings of his philosophy? Let me know. And otherwise, see you there.